This movie premiered at Cannes in May and was released on Netflix in December. Talk about a perfectly planned release schedule. Hey everybody, welcome to Mainly Movies. Today I'm going to be talking about the 2023 Netflix melodrama, May December. If you're new here, please consider subscribing for a variety of movie-related content, like reviews, rank lists, and trailer reactions. All my reviews include a breakdown of the pros and cons, my rating, and some tailored film recommendations, so be sure to watch through to the end of this video for all of that extra content. May December stars Natalie Portman, Julianne, and Charles Melton, and was directed by Todd Haynes. It tells the story of an actress who meets with a controversial couple while preparing for a role in a film about their tabloid fodder past. As a character in May December posits, the complexity of moral gray areas can be a really interesting thing in film. They can challenge you, they can disturb or disgust you, but they can also captivate you, compelling you to try to understand just why people do the things that they do. May December is a film about the making of a based-on-a-true-story movie, but its own central premise is itself loosely based on a true story. Films with real-life origins or inspirations are quite common. We get dozens of biopics every year. But when you think about it, based-on-a-true-story movies are incredibly invasive. They often spotlight an individual's life, and the presentation of that person's story is very dependent on the filmmaker and their creative decisions. As a result, there is the risk of media exploitation of a person or their story, especially when that story is pulled from the tabloid headlines. And that's the concept that we're confronted with in May December, an uncomfortable exploration of motivations and the frequently blurred line that separates truth from sensationalism. At its core, May December features a disturbing and taboo tale. It's a story about control and skewed perceptions, focusing on the long-term consequences of an event that happened decades before. There are many ways the story could have been told, but Todd Haynes chose an unusual stylistic and tonal approach here. This film has a satirical undercurrent to it, but there are very few moments of actual humor here, the dramatic hot dog statement at the beginning of the film probably being the most prominent. Instead, this movie firmly sits in melodrama territory, which is something we don't often see in mainstream cinema. Melodrama usually has a negative connotation these days, and we generally associate it with poorly written, mawkish campiness. But this film mostly skirts the negative aspects of the genre. There's very little camp here, and it embraces its melodrama with clear intentionality. The story details and uncomfortable interactions, the slow zoom-ins and outs, the dramatic musical stings with a film score largely pulled directly from another movie. It's definitely got a soap opera, Dateline special Lifetime movie feel to it, but somehow it works. May December initially throws us into the midst of this melodrama with very little context. We don't know who these people are. We're just suddenly observing this barbecue. It takes a little while to understand the situation and the relationship dynamics at play, but once we get that information, we're left to simmer in it for the remainder of the movie. This is one of those films where not a whole lot actually happens. Instead, it's very dialogue and conversation heavy, especially in the beginning as characters recount past events during a series of interviews. There is a good deal of tension in the story, especially as it relates to character interactions, but the pacing and payoff for that tension is frequently frustrating. This isn't a movie that ever feels like it's building to something major, so you can't really say it's anticlimactic, but it does frequently tease the audience. It builds tension in a scene and makes you think something's gonna happen, like the melodrama equivalent of that time in a horror movie when you know the jump scare's about to come, but then the scene will just end. No payoff, no release of tension, it just dissipates and doesn't do anything. So the story and plotting of this film are a bit lackluster, but really, this is a movie that's all about its characters. It's the interactions and the realizations conveyed through that unique melodrama lens that make this film something you can't stop watching, even when you're not quite sure if you actually like it. May December boasts a trio of excellent performances from Natalie Portman, Julianne, and Charles Melton. With melodrama, I think we're often used to very flat characters who wear their emotions and intentions prominently on their sleeves, but there's a lot of depth to the performances here. The tense push and pull between Portman and Moore is fascinating to watch, since we never fully have a clear understanding of their motivations or true feelings. Perhaps the most interesting piece of this character puzzle, though, is Melton's Joe. This is the most heartbreaking and challenging role, but also the most captivating, because of exactly what needs to be conveyed to the audience. This is a character who doesn't even have a real understanding of himself, so it's through body language and posture and all these small moments that we get a sense of the truth buried behind the facade of normalcy. May December is gonna be a fairly divisive movie, though interestingly, probably not because of its taboo story premise, something that would be a splitting factor for most any other movie. Instead, it's the way the story's told that's going to divide people. And I think we're going to have two camps. People who really like the film, and those who can't stand it, with very few people in the middle. The melodrama was certainly a choice, one that I suspect will make enjoyment, or even tolerance of the film prohibitive for many people. But if you can embrace the melodrama, or at least accept it, this film offers some thought-provoking character work. It's a very dialogue-heavy and conversation-based movie, but it's just as much a film of looks and glances and the things left unsaid. Alright, let's talk about the pros and cons. The biggest pro has gotta be the performances. Everything has a slightly dramatic flair to it because of the film's melodrama stylization, but the three leads are all exceptionally good here. This is a character study wrapped up in a melodrama, so the performances had to be right on the mark for it to work, and luckily they were. The uncomfortable dynamic between Portman and Moore was really compelling and frequently tense, but it was Charles Melton and his character Joan that really made this movie as thought-provoking as it was. His role seems minor compared to the other two at first, but as the film progresses, he becomes a heartbreaking focal point and the ultimate poster child for the film's thematic takeaways. On the con side, there were a handful of things that didn't fully work for me, like the melodramatic tone, but my only true issue was with the pacing, specifically with how teasing the movie felt. That might sound like a weird way to describe a movie, but that's exactly what it does. It has multiple moments and scenes where you think something's gonna happen. There's tension building, or an uncomfortable and awkward character interaction. The music dramatically rises, swelling up as we prepare for some sort of revelation or major plot beat, only to find the film simply moving on to the next scene. A melodramatic character study was never going to have a particularly eventful plot, but I wish it offered up a bit more story payoff to go along with the character payoff. Before I give you my rating and recommendations, I want to remind you that if you're interested in buying May December, or any of the other films I mentioned today, I do have affiliate links for all of them in the description below. I get a small commission from anything you buy using one of my links, so I'd really appreciate it if you'd use them, if you're in the market for any of these movies. I'm gonna give May December 3 out of 5 paws. In writing my review, my rating bounced around a bit, but I finally settled here on the low side of 3. In many respects, this is a frustrating watch, with dull plotting and an odd melodramatic tone, but the performances and underlying character moments help pull this one back to the positive side. I would recommend May December to people who like character-based films that exist in an uncomfortable moral gray area. That might sound a little specific, but this film is a little specific. It's exceptionally high on melodrama, but comparatively low on camp. Still, the tone is a bit of an acquired taste, and one that'll likely prove too difficult for many to obtain. If you liked May December, I would recommend Persona. This Swedish psychological horror drama is another film that's light on plot, but high on thought-provoking and enigmatic character work. The premise is quite different, but this movie also features an actress and an outsider, and sees the line between the two women blur as their individual identities become increasingly difficult to distinguish. If you'd like another Todd Haynes age gap relationship film, you should check out Carol. This is another movie that spends a lot of time focusing on its characters, often conveying its most important elements through glances rather than words, but it follows a more traditional plot structure, and it's much, much less melodramatic. And if you heard that this was a darkly funny film, but were disappointed with how little humor there actually was, you might want to watch Harold and Maude. This is a dark, often morbid comedy drama that features a taboo romance with a 60-year age gap, but still has some profound and thought-provoking things to say. Alright, a couple questions for you guys. Number 1, have you seen May December? If so, what'd you think of it? And number 2, what's your favorite movie that leans heavily into melodrama? Be sure to leave your answers in the comments below so we can get a discussion going. Alright, so if you got some enjoyment, insight, or information out of this review, I'd appreciate it if you'd hit that like button. And if you haven't done so already, please hit subscribe or add it to see more videos like this. Till next time, this has been Alyssa with Mainly Movies. The way life should be.